In a small, lively village surrounded by green hills, there lived a young girl named Ziri. She was bright and full of life. Everyone in the village loved her smile and kind heart. But life had not been easy for Ziri. A terrible fire had taken her parents away when she was just a little girl. After the fire, her grandfather, Papa Obasi, took her into his home. Papa Obasi was known all around the village. People said he was wise and strong. He wore a long brown robe and carried a heavy walking stick. His voice was deep, and his face was full of lines from many years of living. At first, Ziri was happy with Papa Obasi. He would always ask her how her day was. He would bring her sweet fruits from the market and tell her stories by the fire. Every night, he would also give her a small clay cup with a dark drink inside. "Drink this, my precious," Papa Obasi would say, smiling warmly. "It will help you sleep well and grow strong." Ziri trusted him. After all, he was her only family now. So every night, without asking any questions, she would drink the medicine. It tasted bitter, but soon after drinking it, her eyes would grow heavy. She would fall into a deep, heavy sleep without any dreams. At first, Ziri thought it was good. She always woke up feeling fresh. But as time went by, she started to feel something was wrong. Some nights, before the sleep took her, she thought she heard soft whispers inside the house. Whispers that didn't belong to Papa Obasi or anyone else. Other times, she felt like someone was standing close to her bed, watching her. When she opened her eyes, there was no one there. Or so it seemed. Ziri tried to push away the fear. "Maybe it's just my imagination," she told herself. But deep down, she knew something was not right. One night, as she stared at the clay cup in her hands, an idea came into her mind. What if she didn't drink it? What if she pretended? Her hands trembled as she made her decision. She waited until Papa Obasi left the room. Then, carefully, she poured the drink into the soil of her flower pot by the window. She wiped her mouth and laid back on her bed, pretending to be asleep. The house grew very quiet. So quiet that Ziri could hear the ticking of the old clock on the wall. She kept her eyes almost closed, leaving a small slit open so she could see. Minutes passed. Then, she heard it, the soft creak of the wooden door. Her heart jumped. Her breath caught in her throat. Through the tiny slit of her eyes, she saw Papa Obasi stepping into her room. He looked around carefully, thinking she was asleep. Then he moved toward her closet. Ziri's heart beat so fast she thought it would burst. She stayed very still. Papa Obasi pulled out an old, dusty chest. It was locked with a thick chain. Ziri's eyes widened. She knew that chest. It had belonged to her late mother. She had seen it once, long ago. From under his robe, Papa Obasi pulled out a small key tied to a string around his waist. He unlocked the chest and slowly opened it. Inside, Ziri saw papers, jewelry, and a torn envelope with a strange red seal. She couldn't read everything from her bed, but she knew, somehow, that it was very important. Papa Obasi took out some papers, read them quickly under the dim light, and then placed them back carefully. He locked the chest again, tucked the key back under his robe, and tiptoed out of the room. Ziri lay still until she was sure he was gone. Only then did she allow a tear to slip down her cheek. Something was terribly wrong. And she knew, the sleeping medicine was never meant to help her. It was meant to keep her asleep. So she would never find out the truth. The next evening, Ziri sat at the dinner table with Papa Obasi. He smiled warmly and handed her the small clay cup. "Drink up, my precious one," he said, as always. Ziri's hands shook a little, but she forced a smile. She lifted the cup to her lips, tilted it slightly, but this time, she let the thick, bitter drink slide into the flower pot beside her chair. Papa Obasi did not notice. He patted her head and sent her off to bed. Ziri climbed into bed and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She kept her eyes half closed, breathing slowly, pretending to fall asleep. Her heart beat loudly in her chest. Would Papa Obasi come? The house grew dark and quiet. The oil lamp in the hallway flickered. Then, she heard it, the soft creak of the wooden floorboards. Her door opened. Ziri's body tensed. She wanted to scream, But she stayed still. Through the narrow slit of her eyes, she saw Papa Obasi step inside. He moved carefully, as if not wanting to wake her. In his hands, he carried a small lantern. He went straight to her closet. Zeri almost gasped as she watched him reach behind her dresses and feel along the wooden wall. After a few seconds, he pressed something, a hidden button, and a piece of the wall slid open. Behind it, there was a small, dark tunnel. Papa Obasi looked back once to make sure she was sleeping. Then he disappeared inside the tunnel, carrying his lantern. Zeri waited until she could no longer hear his footsteps. She threw off her blanket and tiptoed to the closet. The hidden door was still open. Zeri stared into the darkness. Fear pulled at her, but so did curiosity. Where was Papa Obasi going? What was he hiding? Without thinking, she grabbed her shawl and slipped inside the secret tunnel. The air smelled musty, like old earth and forgotten things. The passage was narrow, and Zeri had to walk sideways. She followed the faint glow of Papa Obasi's lantern, careful not to make a sound. The tunnel twisted and turned, going deeper into the ground. Finally, Zeri saw a light ahead, a small room carved into the earth. She peered around the corner. Her eyes widened in shock. The room was full of old scrolls, leather-bound books, shining jewels, and most shocking of all, land papers with her family's name written across them. Papa Obasi knelt in front of a stone table. He was sorting through the papers, whispering to himself. "She must never know," he muttered. "She is just a child. The land must be mine. I deserve it after all these years." Zeri's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. The man she trusted most, her own grandfather, had been lying to her. He had been drugging her so she would not discover the truth. Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She could not cry now. She had to be strong. She had to think fast. If Papa Obasi caught her here, she did not know what he would do. Very carefully, she tiptoed back through the tunnel and into her room, closing the secret door behind her. She lay in bed, heart racing, mind spinning. One thing was clear, she needed help. And she knew exactly who could help her, her best friend, Marzigo. Tomorrow, they would make a plan. Tomorrow, they would find a way to bring the truth to light. But tonight, Zeri slept with one eye open, just in case. The morning sun peeked through the window. Zeri sat on the edge of her bed, already dressed, her mind racing. She had not slept much. Every sound in the night had made her jump. But now it was morning, and she had to move fast. Quietly, she slipped out of the house. The village was just waking up. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Birds chirped in the trees. Zeri hurried down the dusty path to Masego's hut. Marzigo was outside, feeding his goats. When he saw Zeri's face, he knew something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, dropping the feed. Zeri grabbed his hand and pulled him behind a tree. "I found something," she whispered. "Something terrible. Papa Obasi has been lying to me." Masego's eyes grew wide. Lying? About what? Zeri told him everything, about the drink, the secret tunnel, the papers, and Papa Obasi's plan to steal her family's land. When she finished, Masego's mouth hung open. "We have to tell the chief," he said. Zeri shook her head quickly. "No. Papa Obasi is respected. No one will believe me without proof." Marzigo thought for a moment, scratching his head. "Then we must get proof." Zeri nodded. "But how?" Marzigo grinned. "I have an idea." He pulled a small object from his pocket, an old, battered recorder. It had once belonged to his older brother. "We'll record him," Marzigo said. "We'll catch him talking about the land." Zeri's heart leapt with hope. Yes, that could work. But then her face fell. "How will we get him to talk?" she asked. Marzigo smiled wider. "Leave that to me." That evening, Zeri acted as if everything was normal. She sat with Papa Obasi at the dinner table again. He gave her the same clay cup with the bitter drink. She pretended to sip it, but once more, poured it into the flower pot when he wasn't looking. After dinner, She yawned loudly. "I'm so sleepy, Papa," she said. "I'll go to bed now." Papa Obasi smiled and nodded. Zeri went to her room and left the door slightly open, just like the night before. But hidden inside her pillow was Masego's recorder, already turned on. She waited under the covers, heart pounding. Sure enough, after some time, she heard the soft creak of the floorboards. Papa Obasi entered her room, carrying his lantern. He went straight to the closet, pressed the hidden button, and slipped into the secret tunnel. Ziri counted to 10, then got up. She crept to the closet, pulling the recorder from her pillow. Without a sound, she followed Papa Obasi through the tunnel, holding the recorder close. She stayed just out of sight as he reached the secret room and began to speak again, to himself. "She thinks she is safe," he muttered. "But soon the land will be mine. It is my right. After all the years I wasted on her foolish father." Zeri held her breath, making sure the recorder captured every word. When Papa Obasi started shuffling papers again, Zeri tiptoed back through the tunnel. She climbed into bed just before he returned. When he peeked into her room, she was already still, breathing slow, pretending to sleep. Papa Obasi closed the door quietly behind him. Zeri clutched the recorder tightly under her blanket. She had the proof. Now, the real fight would begin. The next morning, Ziri and Marzigo met under the old baobab tree. Zeri's hands trembled as she pressed play on the recorder. Together, they listened to Papa Obasi's voice. When it finished, Marzigo looked at her with shining eyes. "We have him," he said. Zeri nodded. But deep down, fear gnawed at her heart. Papa Obasi was clever. He would not give up easily. "We must take this to Chief Alumo," Marzigo said. "He is the only one who can stop Papa Obasi." Ziri agreed. But as they tucked the recorder safely into Masego's satchel, a loud shout rang out. "There they are!" Zeri spun around. Papa Obasi stood a few feet away, anger burning in his eyes. Beside him were two men from the village. Big, strong men. "He knows." Zeri gasped. Marzigo grabbed her hand. "Run!" They dashed down the path, feet pounding the earth. Behind them, the men shouted and gave chase. Zeri's lungs burned. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "We can't let them catch us," Marzigo cried. They darted through the narrow paths between the huts, knocking over baskets and startling chickens. Villagers stared as the chase sped past. Zeri's mind raced. The market, she thought. If they could reach the busy market square, they might lose Papa Obasi and his men. "Follow me," she shouted to Marzigo. They veered left, cutting through a thicket of trees. Thorns scratched their arms and legs, but they kept going. At last, they burst into the market square. Women selling yams, men sharpening knives, children chasing goats. The place was crowded and noisy. Perfect. Ziri and Marzigo ducked behind a tall stack of woven mats. They crouched low, trying to catch their breath. Papa Obasi and his men pushed through the crowd, looking around wildly. Ziri and Marzigo stayed perfectly still. Minutes passed. Long, heavy minutes. Finally, Papa Obasi and his men moved on, searching elsewhere. Ziri let out a shaky sigh. "We need to move fast," Marzigo whispered. Zeri nodded. They knew the chief's hut was at the far end of the village, near the river. Carefully, they slipped through the crowd, sticking to the shadows. Every step was dangerous. Every heartbeat was loud in Zeri's ears. At last, they reached the path that led to Chief Alumo's compound. They ran the final stretch, not daring to look back. When they reached the gate, two guards stepped forward. "We must see the chief," Zeri cried, breathless. "It's urgent." The guards looked at each other, then at the two frightened children. One of them nodded and disappeared inside. Zeri clutched Masego's arm tightly. She could only pray they were not too late. The guard returned quickly. "The chief will see you," he said. Ziri and Marzigo followed him through the large wooden gate. Inside, the compound was cool and quiet. They passed rows of carved statues and colorful cloths hanging from the walls. At the center sat Chief Alumo. He was an old man with kind but sharp eyes. His staff of office rested beside him. He watched them closely as they approached. "What brings 2 children to my court in such a rush?" he asked, his voice deep and steady. Zuri dropped to her knees. Mars Ego did the same. "Great Chief," Zuri began, her voice trembling, "we bring grave news." Mars Ego pulled the recorder from his satchel and held it out. Chief Alumo took it, raising one eyebrow. "Play it," he said. Mars Ego pressed the button. Papa Obasi's voice filled the room. The chief listened in silence, his face unreadable. When the recording ended, he sat very still for a moment. Then he spoke. "This is serious," he said. Zuri's heart pounded. Would he believe them? Would he help them? Chief Alumo rose slowly to his feet. He turned to his guards. "Bring Papa Obasi here," he commanded. "And do it quietly." The guards saluted and hurried away. Chief Alumo looked down at Zuri and Mars Ego. "You two have shown great courage," he said. "But you must stay hidden for now. It is not safe." He clapped his hands twice. A servant appeared and led them to a small room at the back of the compound. It was dim and cool, with mats on the floor. "Stay here until I call for you," the servant said. Zuri and Mars Ego sat down, their backs against the wall. Outside, the village buzzed with life. But in the small room, time seemed to stand still. Zuri hugged her knees to her chest. "What if he escapes?" she whispered. Mars Ego shook his head. "He won't," he said firmly. "The chief is wise. He knows what to do." Still, doubt gnawed at Zuri's heart. Papa Obasi was slippery like an eel. He would not go down without a fight. They waited. And waited. Every sound outside made Zuri jump. Then, at last, they heard footsteps approaching. The door creaked open. It was the servant. "The chief calls for you," he said. Zuri and Mars Ego rose, their legs shaky. They followed the servant back into the large court. And there, standing before Chief Alumo, in chains, was Papa Obasi. His face was twisted in rage. "You," he snarled, spotting Zuri and Mars Ego. "You will regret this." Chief Alumo slammed his staff against the ground. "Silence," he thundered. Papa Obasi fell quiet, though his eyes still burned with hatred. Chief Alumo turned to Zuri and Mars Ego. "Because of your bravery, a great evil has been uncovered," he said. "Our village owes you a debt." Tears stung Zuri's eyes. For the first time in many months, she felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, things would finally change. The villagers gathered in the square. They stared in shock as Papa Obasi stood in chains before Chief Alumo. Some whispered. Some wept. Others just stared in silence. Chief Alumo raised his hand. "Today, we have uncovered betrayal," he said. "But we have also found courage." He looked at Zuri and Mars Ego. "These two have saved us all." The crowd began to murmur. A few people clapped. Then more joined. Soon, the whole square was filled with the sound of clapping and cheers. Zuri's cheeks flushed. Mars Ego grinned. But deep inside, Zuri felt uneasy. Papa Obasi was caught. But was that the end? Chief Alumo turned back to Papa Obasi. "You will be judged by the laws of our ancestors," he said firmly. Guards dragged Papa Obasi away. The square slowly emptied. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and purple. Zuri and Mars Ego stayed close to Chief Alumo. He led them into his private chambers. There, he spoke in a low voice. "You did well," he said. "But this is only the beginning." Zuri frowned. "What do you mean, Great Chief?" she asked. Chief Alumo leaned in. Papa Obasi was not acting alone. Zuri's heart dropped. Mars Ego stiffened. "There are others," Chief Alumo said. "Hidden in the shadows. Watching. Waiting." The room felt colder. "What can we do?" Mars Ego asked. Chief Alumo smiled sadly. "You have already shown you are brave and wise," he said. "Now, you must be careful. Trust no one." He reached under his robe and pulled out a small, leather-bound book. He handed it to Ziri. "This contains the names of those we suspect," he whispered. "Protect it with your life." Ziri took the book, her hands trembling. Mars Ego peered over her shoulder. The first name on the list made Ziri gasp. It was someone she never would have suspected. Someone close. Someone trusted. She looked up at Chief Alumo, her voice barely a whisper. "What do we do now?" Chief Alumo's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Now," he said, "we prepare for war in the shadows." Night fell over the village. Ziri and Mars Ego hid the leather book under loose stone in Ziri's hut. They barely slept. By morning, dark clouds covered the sky. A bad sign. Ziri clutched the book close to her chest as she and Mars Ego hurried to Chief Alumo's chambers. But when they arrived, the guards were gone. The door stood open. Inside, Chief Alumo was lying on the floor, motionless. Ziri ran to him. "Chief! Chief!" He opened his eyes slowly. His voice was weak. "They came, at night." Ziri's eyes filled with tears. "Who, Chief? Who did this?" Chief Alumo tried to speak, but his voice faded. With his last breath, he whispered, "Trust your heart." Then, he was gone. Ziri knelt beside him, frozen. Mars Ego pulled her up. "We have to move," he said. The sound of footsteps echoed outside. Many footsteps. The enemies were coming. Ziri and Mars Ego darted out the back door, running toward the forest. The leather book was still safe. Deep in the woods, they stopped to catch their breath. "What now?" Mars Ego asked. Ziri opened the book again. The names inside glowed faintly, like fireflies. She realized something. "The book is not just a list," she said. "It's a map. A hidden path. A secret place. A way to start again." They followed the signs, deeper into the forest. Hours passed. Finally, they reached a clearing. There, standing tall, was an ancient tree with a hollow trunk. Inside it, hidden from the world, was a small chest. Ziri opened it. Inside was a symbol, the true crest of the village, untouched by lies. And a message. Hope lives in the pure of heart. Tears filled Ziri's eyes. She turned to Mars Ego. "This is our new beginning," she said. They would rebuild. Not with lies. Not with fear. But with truth, courage, and the light inside them. As the first drops of rain fell, washing the village clean, Ziri and Mars Ego stood strong. The shadows had fallen. The true light had risen. And a new story had begun. Ziri's story teaches us that no matter how dark things get, we have the power to choose light, truth, and courage. But now, I want to hear from you. What did you think of Ziri's journey? What lesson did it teach you? I love reading your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let me know. Also, if you enjoyed this story and want to see more, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our community. And, of course, tell us where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story is reaching. Remember, the light is always stronger than the shadows. Stay brave, stay true, and keep shining.